everyone, Alexa Donne here, and I am making a video because I finally turned in a complete draft of my next YA thriller, The Bitter End, to my editor. Now, if you've been here for a while, you'll go, wait, isn't the last time she gave us an update for this book almost a year ago? Yeah. So this is part of my, you should really be making YouTube videos / maybe you should explain why you went in part why you went full hermit and like where the book is. Because this is the first book since I started this channel like post first book deal that I have not fully vlogged it. I started vlogging it last year and I just ran out of steam. I hit walls and you know, some books, sometimes we have to silently struggle for a long time and work through things and not have the pressure of filming ourselves so that we can figure our shit out and get through the other end and complete that book. And I've been saying it for over a year, but it remains true. I knew that this book was going to be hard. I knew that there were a ton of challenges, but I would have content at the end of it. And I will. I have learned things. I have learned things. So why did I put complete draft in quotes? Because it's me. It's me. And also, it's been a journey. This isn't like the first time my editor has seen this book in the last year and change. No. My poor editor has learned to live with my chaos process. My editor, Elizabeth, might be a saint. So basically, I'm here to catch you up from last July to now and like what the heck happened with this book, kind of. I'm not gonna go into too much detail because as ever, I try to avoid spoilers, so eventually I can make that from first draft to final draft video for The Bitter End once the book is already out, which isn't going to be until fall 2024 because who doesn't love a 2-year gap between books? I'm gonna explain that. And I still owe everyone one for Pretty Dead Queens because, you know, I have an outline, which is progress. Videos. I am very hopeful I will have a little bit more brain space to film this summer, but we'll see. I have been filling my life with all sorts of interesting things. I've played a lot of video games. I've really like upped my cooking game. I'm pretty good at making a good collection of dishes. I just bought baby's first Le Creuset Dutch oven. I'm really proud of myself. Things are happening. I am planting. I'm basically growing an herb garden now for my cooking. I'm just filling my life with all sorts of hobbies where I used to do more YouTube and social media. You know, growth. Oh, I'm also traveling. This is like the mini life update portion. So I'm going on my first cruise in 12 days, 11 days, and because I've lost my mind, basically. I have a friend who's really into cruising. I have been wanting to take a cruise for years because I have been wanting to write a cruise ship murder book for years. And my friend found a deal and was like, go on a cruise with me. And I was like, okay. So I signed up and then I fell down a YouTube hole. Cruise YouTube is really intense, guys. Highly recommend. And then I decided that I was obsessed and so I couldn't wait. So I'm going on a like starter 3-day cruise in 11 days from now, 11, 12 days. Really excited. Not going anywhere exciting because I'm all about the boat. I already am basically a grandma when it comes to kind of my hobbies and my tastes and my kind of sentiments about life. So I'm very much looking forward to being on a giant floating boat with like a fancy dining room and an open bar. So we're gonna give that a go. But quite excitedly, as I was doing all of this research for my cruise, I had a brainwave and I know what I'm gonna do to write a cruise murder book. So essentially, these trips are research / writer's retreat. I'm gonna write on my fall cruise, and I am actually going to vlog that, she says. I am determined to vlog it on that one in the fall, so it's not until like early October. I am actually going to write, I mean, hopefully I'll be a decent ways into this next book. I'm ready to put the YA one to bed so that I can jump into this adult book. Finally, how many years have I been talking about that? And unfortunately, how many years did The Bitter End take? You know, once upon a time in a video, I know I definitely said, oh yeah, I'm hoping, you know, this one only take me a few months to write. Also, if you are a cruise person, let me know down below in the comments, like, you know, let's hang out on a cruise. I'm all in. I am all in. I never take vacation, so this is very, very exciting. I think that this one next week is like the first thing that would count as a vacation that has nothing to do with book travel. So either a writer's retreat or an event, or like work travel for my day job, business travel, or like sad travel, like my mom died, like an actual vacation where I'm going to unplug and enjoy myself in years. Because technically, I don't even know, like, I don't take, I'm bad at vacation. Because even in the past, I would do like Harry Potter conventions, but I was running them. That's not a vacation either. I'm really bad at vacation, so very exciting. So, the bitter end. It's a book, complete draft, because it's me. What I sent is like 95% done as a draft. The epilogue isn't quite done, but enough of it is there, the bones. And I sent her a book that is readable from start to finish. It's like 98% a book. But as I said, this is not the first time my editor has seen it. Okay, so it was very funny watching that bit of last year's video. I was like, when is the last time I like posted an update on this channel about this book? And I laughed it past me. A sweet summer child past me, you know, confidently saying, I'm like halfway through. This is going so well. The pars down version is a couple weeks later, which was my official technical deadline for the book last August. My editor and I had a chat about kind of how it was going and like noodling on it. Cause of course my editor, when she bought it, had like a full synopsis. Like I always kind of have a roadmap of where the book is going. And she had questions about where the book was going. I'm not gonna tell you what the thing is that we plucked out of this book and why it took so long to finish it, because I plan on using it for a later book and will keep all of my secrets close to the vest. But essentially my editor said, I'm not so sure about doing this thing anymore with the book. And, you know, cue like little panic because I work backwards, and that thing was something I had definitely worked backwards from. Though luckily with this book, ultimately the heart and soul of the book was I wanted to write the trope, isolation trope. So it became a conversation with my editor of like, okay, if I take out that thing, that aspect of the motive, essentially the twist, and I did something else, what can it be where I don't have to change substantially what I've already written, in the sense of like the skeleton is there, it's still the same plot, it's still the same characters, asterisk within reason, but like I can slat something new into it. And this, kids, is how I learned, challenging myself, that I can in fact take the germination, the seed, the, you know, the thing in architecture, the foundational thing, the cornerstone of a book that I worked backwards from, and literally remove it and shove something else in there, and I can salvage a book. Lessons were learned. I've definitely become a stronger writer for it. And so essentially my book went on a slightly crazy journey where I needed to stay unplugged and not vlogging and not sharing, because my poor friends and my poor editor, I have been a semi-neurotic mess for roughly the last year, for a variety of reasons. I think I'm always probably a semi-neurotic mess. But for this book specifically, first I had to take some time off to figure out what that new, like what was I gonna shove in to the backbone of this book to replace the thing. Basically, I had to come up with a bunch of ideas, and I brainstormed with my editor that were spiritually similar in the sense that they would kind of orient the killer in a similar direction, because I already had structure, including a present timeline and a past timeline. So the challenge was I wanted to keep both of those essential things, but I was at the point in the drafting process, because, you know, chaotic me, where I hadn't actually decided what happened at the party. That's the past timeline. There was a party. We love parties in YA. And I hadn't exactly decided what had happened at the party. Well, what a great time to have to re kind of scaffold. So I simultaneously was like, all right, I'm going to figure out exactly what happened at the party, because it's going to have to feed into whatever this new kind of linchpin is. And I spent a month or two just kind of not well refilling, but like reconfiguring exactly what I was going to do. But I didn't stop writing. I kept writing with the thing in mind that I wasn't quite writing toward the same thing anymore, but that I wasn't changing certain things it worked out. It eventually worked out, but because I didn't want to lose my momentum, but I also did, luckily, I had stuff to do. I was promoting Pretty Dead Queen, so there was like, I'm never good at drafting and marketing a book at the same time. I hate it when they overlap. Not good. So I did that, and I had the aha moment within that period of like, oh, I have the thing, and I liked it enough, and I was excited by it. Now I quite like it. And it was actually a really fun email to send to my editor, because I love my editor. She always has like the reins on me, like, whoa, because you know, I can be balls to the wall crazy with what I want to do in my book sometimes. The kind of larger than life aspect of like some of the archetypes of the characters, and like, especially, we know I love playing with rich people, and so some of the stuff in this book, she's been like, are people, like, this isn't very grounded, was kind of her touch point. And half the time I was like, Elizabeth, I hate to break it to you, but people in Los Angeles are like this. And every time she's like, excuse me, I was like, yeah, even teenagers, like not the average. You'll see, it's so fun. This book is so fun. And then other times I'd be like, you are correct. Thank you, editor, for being a balancing force in my life. I have to dig more into this character and make them feel like a real person. And in the case of the killer, there are lots of different ways to kind of write a killer, a culprit, in a book like this. And in this case, it was the kind of motive that was kind of understandable, because there are different kinds of motives. There are mysteries and thrillers where like you empathize with the bad guy essentially, and you understand why they did what they did. And then there are other books where you're like, you are stone cold baddie. And I was leaning toward one, and when I came up with this new idea, I was like, this is bonkers. I love it, but it's bonkers, which almost kind of fits in with what I like to do. But this means that the killer is gonna be like a different character. But yeah, it meant I got to send her an email like, you know how you love for me to like add grounding forces to characters, and like you really want to like sympathize more with this particular character? Too bad. That's not happening anymore. This is the compromise. And that's the thing, when your editors ask you if you can change something, including change something major, it's always a compromise. And I didn't fully strip out the thing. Like, there are still like, there were things I was willing to change, and there were things I wasn't willing to change, and we had a conversation about it. And it is very important to note that that is always how it should go. I could have theoretically, I wouldn't, said, okay, I will throw out everything I've written and write a new book. I wouldn't do that, and she didn't technically ask me to do that, by the way, but like I could have. And I know writers who would do that. They would go completely back to the drawing board and they would start over. That doesn't work for me. So it's always a collaborative process. And honestly, it didn't slow me down that much, all things considered, knock on wood, however, comma, but. And I should say, even through this process, there was this bit in Act 1, right before the first person dies, that I got really stuck on. And I actually skipped it and I went forward. And you know, I was kind of working on it and working on it. And in hindsight, maybe it was a signal that what I was originally writing toward wasn't the right thing, and just my editor's a genius. It all works out. But so through all of this, basically by November, like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I had like 65,000 words of a book. And I sent it to my editor. I said, you know, it's me, your favorite author, who will write 75% of a book and send it to you, and then finish the rest later. I'm the worst. I did that. And so we talked about it. I got basically a mini edit letter. Like it was an edit letter from my editor, but bearing in mind that the whole book wasn't done. She didn't have the whole book, but she had 2/3 of the book. And it was really nice. Like, she read it and was like, you know, I thought you were crazy before. She didn't use those words. Those are my words. But I could tell that she thought I was a little crazy before, when I was sending her like only the first act. And she was like, okay. I sent her 2/3 of the book. She went, I totally see what you're doing now. Okay, like, you do you, go for it. She gave me top line notes for what I had done so far, including some really thoughtful notes that forced me essentially to reconsider my first act. And I honestly did the same thing on Pretty Dead Queens, where I, you know, kind of got a little past halfway. I vlogged that whole process. You actually have evidence of that one. And I was like, oh, Act 1 is bothering me so much. Like, I know that it has fundamental problems that I talked about with my editor. I want to fix it now. So I did the same thing on the bitter end. And that's when I got stuck on one scene in Act 1 for like 4 months because I'm terrible. I am terrible. Backing up. So when I got those notes from her in November, she was like, okay, you can still make your original deadline. Like you can still be published around your original pub date, which was going to be winter, spring 2024. Like the book would have come out in February or March 2024 was my original kind of pub date. And if I got it to her by Christmas, essentially, I could still make that date. I was like, yeah, totally, I can do this. So optimistic, me. And I did, I hustled. I rewrote a large chunk of Act 1. I reconceptualized things. I did my favorite recasting. One of her notes was just like, ugh. It's the classic. At first I was so frustrated, like, no, they're so annoying. She's so wrong. I did this for a reason. And then I thought about it for literally 5 minutes and talked about it with a few people and went, well, she's totally correct. I need to redo that. And it forced me to just like rethink slightly how I was kind of sliding into the book. And I like what I have now so much better. Also in this period, I sent the book to a friend who loves isolation trip thrillers as much as I do, and she kind of gave me that confidence of like, no, your beats are hitting in the right place, kind of helped me interpret some of my editor's notes and kind of better explain my reasoning for where I'd put things in the manuscript. And that same friend pointed out like one thing, she's like, no, you're definitely missing a beat in Act 1, and that really fed into my editor's notes. So I knew that Act 1 needed a fix. And I got back to that scene that I had already skipped before. I know, Bronte! Bronte, come here! We're just gonna have a cattail for a while. So the scene was really essential, like juicy and fun, technically in Act 1, but very much like Promise of the Primacy, fun and gamesy, like a scene that I knew would be juicy, that readers would really enjoy, that would set up like all of our like really good red herrings for Act 2. Red herrings and actual clues. And so I sat down and was like, I have to do this with the additional pressure because I hate myself and why do I do this to myself of whatever I wrote had to be mirrored in the past timeline. And then I was just like really stuck. I basically had to write a drinking game with 8 characters involved, all with different agendas, personalities, and fictional backstories, relationships with each other, as well as different kind of agendas for the game. Different people messing with other people in different ways, plus a killer. One of them is the killer, and it broke my brain a little, and I got so stuck, and it took me forever. I missed my deadline. Like I basically realized, and I talked to my editor, up until the last minute, I wanted to do it so badly, guys. Like I was like writing and working on my birthday because I was like, gotta do it. And that is when I got bumped. And I've talked about this before, that sometimes, well, first of all, I've talked about how deadlines are fake. I actually made a TikTok about it last fall. And oh, the irony. While I was correct, I played myself. I went so far up to the real deadline, because at a certain point the deadlines are real, that I missed it. So I've been bumped before. It's not the end of the world, but I don't enjoy it. Who does? So it's going to be 2 years between my thrillers. Trust me, I hate it. So I got bumped to fall 2024, but at the end of the day, I wasn't done with the book. I needed more time. Like in a theoretical universe, could I have word vomited something that could have been published? Yes. And then the book wouldn't have been as good. And I just can't do that. I can't do that. My like personal perfectionism is just not, no. So the good news is though that it gave me another 6 months of runway. Like once I missed it, I was like, well, I might as well take the time to kind of noodle on this stupid scene that I'm stuck on at the end of Act 1. And so yeah, from like December to March, I was stuck. I'm not proud of it, but that's what happened. And it's not like I was doing other stuff. Like it's not like I wasn't doing stuff. And also technically, I was still like working kind of. It's not like I just wasn't writing that whole time. I was, you know, doing other things in Act 1. I jumped forward into Act 2 but that scene, like, and at a certain point I was like, you can't keep skipping this scene. You have to frickin' write it. So I wrote it badly once. I fixed it, but then I realized that the game that preceded it, they played 2 different drinking games. It's a whole thing. Was wrong. So I rewrote that. Did I mention the additional challenge that I did in Act 1 is I switched some of my POVs around. And I realize I'm so bad at linear storytelling. Irony. I haven't even told you about the whole past versus present timeline. So that's the other thing I did. So I had this whole past timeline, and I got feedback from my editor as well as one of my readers that it was really like dragging the pacing and it felt repetitive. I could just tell that it wasn't landing with my editor, and with my second reader, it also had issues. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna strip it out of the book. I removed it completely and decided I'm gonna make sure that the present timeline works 100% without flashbacks, and then I'll go back and insert them in. Because essentially something like that kind of conceit, past and present timeline, they should dovetail with each other. It's like a dance with each other. But ultimately you want your core mystery to theoretically function on its own, or at least I wanted my present timeline, the core mystery timeline, to carry its own weight. I was definitely using the past timeline as a bit of a crutch to do more character background and establishment than I should be doing. They were dragging. They had a lot of info dumping. Though on the plus side, no writing is wasted. Spending that time on those parts, I had like at least 10,000 words, 10 to 12,000 words, and that wasn't even all of them. I completed like 5 out of 8 of them. Too many words, but it definitely helped me get to know those characters. It helped me kind of massage and decide on some aspects of their backstory, which was a very helpful writing exercise. And don't worry, we'll come back to the past timeline. It all came back around, but I stripped it out of the story and I started back at the beginning to essentially do that revision pass with my editor's notes that I got in November for 75% of the book, and make it stand on its own 2 feet. Found much more better, subtle ways to incorporate aspects of the backstory to really like think what is the most important aspect of these things that I came up with for all 8 freaking characters. And how do I weave it in? How are they interacting in the present with that past in the back of my mind? Because I had already written it, again, very helpful. And very importantly, I had decided what happened at the party when I came up with the kind of new twist and ending. So I had a roadmap for that. So all of that, basically, I just let it be in my head while I worked to make the present timeline stand on its own. So I took the pressure off of, and the game in the present has to mirror the game in the past for the time being, only focusing on the present. But finally, I vomited out something. I had something that I didn't utterly hate so that I could move forward. And that happened in March sometime. Time really blurs together. Also important to note, day job has been pretty busy. I have a lot going on, and this is also a book where it's been a little harder to juggle that, and I should mention that and give myself some credit instead of beating myself up for how freaking long it took me to write this book. That's just the reality of maintaining a job on top of all of this. So I was really only writing on weekends is the reality of finishing this stupid book. I just didn't have the time to do late weeknight writing. Just it's so exhausting, in part because we are back in the office on a hybrid schedule. So I'm back in the office several days a week. Though on the plus side, we moved floors and I have an office. So, also in this time, notable, I caught up or started to catch up on my TBR. I am still very behind on my TBR, but like using audiobooks to breeze through a bunch of thrillers that I hadn't read, which definitely always kind of helps me. You know, when I don't read them, it's because it's not helpful to read them, and when I do read them, they're always helpful, and I kind of have to go with the flow. So all of 2022, while I was like really in the weeds on this book, I only listened to nonfiction, and then as I was essentially revising this book, I dove back into thrillers. I'm still catching up on my thriller TBR, so like all of that working in concert to kind of push me through this book. But steadily, every single weekend through April into May, I chipped away at it. I got into Act 2, revising, taking my editor's notes, fixing the things that she'd mentioned, you know, keeping pacing and tension in mind, had like character arc threads and tweaks I wanted to make. I got a lot closer in this whole process, just taking the time to get to know. Authors always sound crazy when we talk like this about fictional characters, but getting to know these characters and figuring out who they actually are in particular, this is always a challenge, and to a certain point, certain characters are going to be archetypes. in thrillers and certain types of commercial fiction, but it definitely bothered me that on earlier passes, you know, they were frothy and they were fun, but I had a lot of caricatures, more than I liked, including of people who died. It's always a double-edged sword. They have to be vaguely dislikable enough that you can kill them, but they should still kind of feel like people. Double-edged sword. But I'm actually at the point now where like I kind of feel bad for bumping off some of these characters, which is how you know it's going pretty well. So I've added more layering, I've differentiated characters that were blurring together a little bit, like figured them out, which of course ultimately helped me figure out that scene where I had to balance all 8 of them all at the same time, playing a game with an agenda. Fun times, so hard. So in May, I gave my book to another fresh reader. I've had my alpha readers on this book, but they've been hearing me blather on about it for a long time, so they know all the twists and turns, but I wanted a fresh person, a thriller reader. So I gave it to them without the flashbacks. It also meant they were the first person to read like 75,000 words of this book because I'd like kind of tweaked it and fluffed it a bit. It still ended in the same place that my editor read up to, which was the villain reveal. I got that far, was still only that far, but all the flashbacks were stripped out, but I'd applied all of my editor's notes to Act 1 and Act 2 for character and pacing and tension. And I got some really good notes back from this person, and in particular, I did tell them there had been flashbacks and the event is referenced in the present, and I asked her, how did this impact your reading experience? Like, what is not on the page that you feel like you're missing, if anything? And she confirmed a hunch, a feeling, because I always intended to hopefully put the flashbacks back in, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know where, or I would pare them back, or, you know, up in the air. And she just gave me notes that really helped me go, okay, I need to go back to how I was using them before. 8 flashbacks from the point of view of 8 different characters in third person at this event in the past, woven through the book, taking you chronologically through this thing that happened. Classic. But as they existed, I knew that they were wrong, at least most of them. So in mid-May, which is bringing us so close to like, I sent my editor a mostly complete draft of this book, I started over on them. I stripped them out into their own Word document, only chronologically the flashback chapters. I also did some split screening in Scrivener for the 3 that I knew were the most deadweight from the 3 core POV characters, because in the present we get it through 3 POVs, and you know, the characters I knew the best and care the most about, so of course their past chapters were bloated and full of like info dumping and just like scenery chewing, and I knew I had to drill down to the most essential beats of each of their flashback chapters and of their character and of their backstory and be brutal with myself. So I set myself a word count goal for each of the flashback chapters, with the goal that they would feel more like vignettes at key inflection points in the present timeline, that you would dip into the past where it would complement what was in the present, either by providing additional information, giving you a breather from the action, and providing a new nugget of information that was going to arc to the end, but that they needed to not monumentally stop the pacing. And this all in mind, I mean, my editor still has to read these and hopefully it worked, but at first my overly ambitious goal was that I wanted them to each be less than 1,000 words. I already had a few that clocked in under 1,000 words, and I knew that they were zippy and dippy and I didn't have to overly rework them. So I had a few that I knew already worked, but that proved too difficult. So I was like, okay, 1,200 words. On one, I'm a little over than that, but more or less 1,200 to like 1,500 words. And I know that my editor extraordinaire, who's very good at line editing, will hopefully help me them a little bit more. But I basically trimmed them down. I made sure each one had an essential beat toward a point. No meandering, no useless conversation. Everything had to serve the present story. I was brutal with myself. And I fixed the ones I had already written. And then I figured out the ones I hadn't written. There was one that I was really stuck on because it was like the hardest character over the course of this book, weirdly, to get to know. A very important character, but a character who just wasn't as kind of obvious of what I was gonna do with them. But basically, like, 3 weeks ago now, like 3-ish weeks ago, I finally figured out that chapter, and in a wild push over a single weekend, I finished all of them. That got me so excited because I basically got forward into the weeds of we love a villain reveal, and that started kind of giving me the inspiration and the juices flowing to finish the damn book. So over the course of 2 weekends with a couple of weekdays in there, that's when you know I'm really motivated, I word vomited the rest of this stupid book. Thank God. Including asterisk the epilogue. I started it, I was like, yes, and then I petered out in the middle. I lost my flow a little. I was like, oh no, but it's the epilogue, so it's fine. But then I had the brainwave of like, oh, no, because it's that like final image, like you have to like know what it is. And I knew the substance of what it was, but I didn't know how I was gonna write it, and it came to me. So essentially, complete draft I sent to my editor. The epilogue has a beginning and an end, and it's going to need a middle, but it'll get there. The closing image is like there, and that made me go, oh, if I'm gonna do this really cool thing in the closing, I have to make a small tweak in the climax, and like, so just like lots of jumping around. And I did it. I actually technically, knock on wood, finished 2 weeks ago. And I checked in with my editor and she was like, you know, honestly, you can have a couple more weeks because I'm going to Italy. And I was like, A, jealous. B, the irony that I finished early and it doesn't make sense to send it to you right now. But I used that time to send it to more readers. I sent it to another fresh reader, someone I had miraculously not blabbed the entire plot of this book to, and they also gave me some really valuable feedback about how things were landing. They gave me some ideas about like the first time they grokked who the bad guy was and like why, and I was able to basically go through and do like another light revision pass. I had some continuity things that I wanted to fix. I did that. So yeah, I finally sent my editor last night, a complete draft where I've like fixed most of the things that I want to fix, but I also know I still have problems, but that you have to repeat this to yourself. Like at a certain point, you just have to send it in. My editor's gonna help me fix it. It's a book. It's technically a book. It's almost 90,000 words. So yeah. Yeah, when I sent it to her in November, it was 65,000 words, and now it's 90,000 words. It's a book. So it just took forever. It just took forever. So that's what I've been doing. It took me over a year from the point of selling this book to my publisher to actually write something that I think counts as a draft. Mind you, a draft that my editor has already had hands on, that we've already done essentially revision passes on. So that is the good thing. It's not like this is a zero draft. It's probably like a solid second draft, technically. And then we'll do a dev and a line pass on it this summer, because like the next deadline's real. Like if I want this book to come out, it's gonna be done this summer. So it's a real thing, it's happening. Chaos, I'm a chaos process. But I've learned a lot. Both what to do, what not to do. Like some of my instincts were right and some of them were not wrong, but like definitely needed like a process. Past versus present timeline, writing multi-POVs, third versus first. Honestly, I just adore writing in third person. I do. It's not right for YA thrillers too much of the time, but writing third in those flashbacks, and at first my editor wasn't sure, and then, well, I mean, we're gonna see what she thinks now, but I don't care. I want them in third. I love them in third. I love the like distance that can add, but you can use distance to your advantage. But also like voice is like a little bit different in third. I just love third. I love third so much that actually I have kind of started workshopping the next thing I'm gonna write, which is adult, and it's gonna be a third person. I'm so excited. And it's also gonna be a multi-POV. So I'm gonna take some of these lessons I've hopefully learned, apply it to the next one, and further kind of push myself and challenge myself and grow as a writer in general, but as a mystery writer specifically. So there will be content, I promise. And then there are other things I did in this book that are like spoilery that I think represent growth, like things that I did that I haven't tried before. So just, you know, we're learning, we're growing, we're trying, and eventually it'll be content. Though it's always like, you see, like, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you how I muddled through a thing, and maybe that will help you to do it as well. This also has parts It's 4 parts. I have quotes at the beginning of each part. It's so fancy. I added like headers to the chapters that have like the day and the time. It's just so fancy, this thriller, and I'm very, very excited. So you're not gonna see it for another year because that's how publishing works, but I still have the early cover comp. They sent it to me when we thought I might meet my original deadline, and I'm really excited about what the book is going to look like. Once again, I'm gonna get an amazing cover from my publisher. I love them. There will be a preview, a teaser chapter in my Pretty Dead Queens paperback, which is coming out next year, I think in the spring, I think in February, because I did have to, that was another thing like motivating me. I had to send my editor my first chapter, and we line edited it and we sent it off to copy edit. So like the first chapter can't really change. So there will be a preview in there. So you will get to meet one of my 3 POV characters, Piper, in the first chapter of The Bitter End, sooner rather than later. But yeah, I'm so excited to be almost done. I'm not done, there's still work to do, but it's the exciting kind of work. Like I can fix something that exists. That's the hard part, is the drafting, and there's a book that exists-ish. It's definitely different from Pretty Dead Queens. If you like Pretty Dead Queens, thank you, great, I love you. But if you liked the Ivies, The Bitter End is definitely for you. The Ivies and Pretty Dead Queens are pretty different, but the Ivies and The Bitter End are very spiritually similar. And I think I just like, I go back and forth. Like, I want to write like a high octane, like sharp thriller, and then I want to write a vibes, slow burn suspense, back and forth, because the next YA thriller I'm thinking of is definitely going to be more like Pretty Dead Queens than like the Ivies or The Bitter End. I just like to do something different-ish with each book, and that's one of my favorite things about mystery, thriller, suspense as a genre. As a reader, as well as a writer, there's so many different types of stories and ways to tell them, and techniques and craft and reading experiences, and I like exploring the different ones. Writing an isolation trope thriller has definitely been a challenge, a lot of it of my own making. Why do I do this to myself? But I'm really excited and thrilled. I've been saying it for the last year. I know it's going to be a good book. It's just not a good book yet, and I'm much closer to it being a good book than I was to it not being anything before. So the goal is progress, not perfection. Keep on swimming, all of that jazz. So that's where I am. Unscripted chaos writing update in lieu of a year of vlogs. So that's where I am. How are you guys? What's up? How is everyone? But seriously, does anyone else cruise? Because like, I might have a problem now, like a serious problem. Like, my friend is about to earn diamond status on Royal Caribbean, and just seeing the perks there, I'm like, how many cruises can I realistically take? Am I a cruise person now? Watch me get on this boat next week and like get seasick, but hopefully not. We'll see. Very excited to do a writing retreat on a boat, sure. I'll be a boat person. If you're a cruise person and you like books set on cruises, do you have book recommendations for books set on cruises? I should read some. Yeah, that's great, yeah. Or do you cook? What are your favorite recipes to cook in a Dutch oven? I'm just doing all the things nowadays. It's really nice. I feel very well-rounded. So yeah, I'm so excited for you guys to read The Bitter End finally, eventually. Next year, I will technically have 3 books coming out. The Stars We Steal paperback is out in January. The Pretty Dead Queens paperback is out in February, so backlist. And then The Bitter End will be available sometime in the fall. I don't have a pub date yet, but we'll see. Just knock on wood, I've just begged them not to give me anything near the election. I will also be at BoucherCon over Labor Day weekend, a mystery writers convention, so if anyone else is going to be there, say hi. Thank you so much for watching and being infinitely patient with me and my utter inability to regularly film videos, but I think it's what I needed for this book, so thank you so much. And as always, guys, happy writing.